He in the Carrier Security and Enterprise Business Unit as a principal architect. He is part of Akamai's continued investment to deliver services that make the internet fast, reliable, and secure. Over 30 years, he has applied his leadership and business acumen on cybersecurity and networking experience to the expansion of the internet. Today, his talk will focus on our very current situation. The title is Welcome to CyberWar, Long-Term Ramification Unleashed by Russia's War. Ladies and gentlemen, please join in welcoming Mr. Barry Greene. He's online.
Thank you very much. I wish I was there. Hopefully, as everybody says, we get out of COVID, we're able to travel more, and I'm looking forward to that coming back there. And it's also really pleased. I really like to compliment the organizers and compliment everybody who is there physically in a room coming together in this forum. I reminisce back in 1997, Philip Smith, who's running around there, myself, and Arpakorn Bukhan Chen, who we all worked for Cisco Systems at the time, and we were teaching the first ISP workshops of how to build internet exchange points. And then here we are today, doing these sort of things with it. So I'm going to share my screen right now and get into our talk. Just one moment. Let me share the right screen here. Okay. So as everybody knows, we have a situation that's impacting the world and will continue to impact the world. One of the things that you'll hear in this talk, and this is a practical talk, this is an operations meeting, so you don't want to get theory. You want to get like some things you can take back to your network and your customers and help protect them. If you have questions, pop them into the Q&A section. And then also we're posting the slides. So any of the slide here, don't worry about if trying to copy the slides. We will be sending the slides in Google format and PDF, so that way you can use them. So again, thank you for the forum for inviting me. What we're going to cover really quickly is the difference between what we have been seeing in our security threat, which is cyber criminal activity, and cyber war. They're different, and it's shaping a lot of what's going to be happening to all of our networks for many years to come. I say that in many years to come, and we'll explain why. And I'll give some examples of some of the tools we have available to us. I'll emphasize one of the things that CSIRTs, and Thailand is fortunate to have a very healthy, vibrant, and productive CERT team, the Thai CERT team, which tomorrow's session, I'm going to do a session, we'll talk more about that. But what these CERT teams and what they are producing now that can help you protect your network and protect your customers with the cyber warfare activities. Key situation is just because bullets and bombs and missiles are flying, there has been a cyber warfare going on. And there's a difference in cyber warfare. The key thing that people are trying to get their minds around is they're saying, how come I'm not seeing these cyber attacks in the press? You're not going to see the cyber warfare attacks in the press, but they're happening. I have not been this busy ever as a cybersecurity professional ever. I've been doing networking for 35 plus years, and this is intense. The amount of activity going on behind the scenes, the back and forth. But you're not seeing it in the press because the opposing forces are going back and forth, and it's very dynamic, right? So this is kind of one of the things that is different. Reporters are saying, like, can you show me the attack happening? No, can't, because it's different. It's not like ransomware. Ransomware is very loud. DDoS, very loud. Everybody sees it. You can put it into the press. Cyber warfare, it's quiet. until the time period where the attack is launched, and you have this thing, what we call a cyberkinetic attack, right? So this is one of the differences. So what we had before is we had cyber criminals, ransomware, malware, data leakages, things like that. So we had lots of cyber criminal activities. And we always up to the side said, well, there's these nation states, China against US against this country, Russia, you have this sort of thing going on, Iran, Israel, right? It was kind of there, but it wasn't like really bothering us as network professionals all over the world, right? Then we also had the political protesters. Oh, I'm upset with Wall Street, or I'm upset with whaling operations in Japan, or I'm upset with some political thing going on, right? So we get a lot of this is the disinformation campaigns and things like that is part of this political part. Then more so in Asia than in North America, you get corporate threats. Corporate threats is where I'm a company, I'm got money, I'm going to hire another company to spy on my competitors, right? That's what we call a corporate threat. All these are coming together in cyber warfare now. The Russians have their corporations who work for them, the political activists to work for them, and cyber criminals who have said, we're now going to help out Russia. We had the same thing with Ukraine, right? And corporate contractors working for a nation state is not new. Michael Snowden worked for a contractor who worked for the National Security Agency of the United States. So it's not new. So this is kind of like the alignment. Now we got this activity going on. And as I pointed out to some people, there are multiple cyber warfare activities happening right now. We all see Russia and Ukraine, but India and China has been acting up over the last 5 months. In the last 3 months, we saw a lot of different activities where you got interests colliding with each other with India and China. That's in region. That's in region to where we're at in Asia Pacific. So this is something to be mindful of is that now that, the Russia and Ukraine are more prevalent, more state actors are going to be acting up and doing activities, and they threaten into our network. So we're going to see these state actors on both sides doing things. You're going to see the patriotic forces who volunteer, and we're going to volunteer and support Ukraine attack Russia. And on the Russian side, they're going to attack others, including others who are like supporting sanctions. So any country who supports the sanctions is a viable target to all these patriotic and volunteers, right? Then you're going to have other nation state actors. The day after the tanks roll across the border in Ukraine, you had a threat advisory come out to the United States about Iranian threat actors, because they say, hey, with all this chaos, I'm going to do stuff. And with all this cyber warfare state actor activity, the cyber criminal stuff doesn't stop. We still got our cyber criminal activities happening. They're still going to happen with us, right? So this is kind of like one of our challenges is the intensity we had before is now added with the cyber warfare threat. We have to rethink it. Now, some people think that, oh, I'm in Thailand, I'm immune. Russia and Ukraine are far away. No, that's not the way the internet works. And this is over the years, I remember in when cyber warriors, different military groups I would be given sessions with, and they're saying, oh, we can, here's how the cyber war works around borders. I say, no, there's no borders. The whole world's all smashed together. On the internet, you can't hide. It's all interconnected, right? As you're here in the peer forum, you're all sitting together. And this is one of the things that people don't realize how fragile the internet is. If it wasn't for you sitting in the room right now and investing in connecting with each other and being during the break, going off in the coffee break and actually talking to each other and who's going to appear with whom, how are you going to set up the BGP sessions? How are you going to secure those sessions? How are you going to set up the links? It's all interconnected, right? So there isn't like a geographic area. That means that you can be impacted even though the threat actors are in another part of the world. So you take a consequence of that, right? We have this thing in cyber warfare. One of the things you see that's different is you go after cyberkinetic. Right when the war started, you had an attack on Viasat. Viasat was a cyberkinetic attack. They got in through a VPN, poorly configured VPN system, and their goal, as far as what people see, was shut down the satellite communications to the unmanned aerial vehicles because they knew there were going to be a problem. That was the intent, right? They launched an attack. They called it ISA rain that wiped out modems, so you actually had to replace the modem. Yes, in cyber warfare, it's not about I'm going to put encryption and give me a key. They don't care about that. They will wipe it. They will delete it. They'll destroy hard disks. They'll spin it up where they don't work anymore. Well, one of the big concerns was Enercon had this whole range of wind turbines on the same system using some of the same modems, and all at the top of the wind turbine, the control system for how to control the turbines for doing updates and monitoring, they also got wiped out with acid rain. That's what we call a collateral impact, a collateral kinetic being like physical. It goes physical, right? Impact in a cyber warfare attack. That's what's one of the core differences. If you're so used to like, oh, somebody coming in and breaking in and steal my passwords or stealing my data, that's criminal. Cyber warfare is I go in there and I delete everything. And I delete it right in the time period it's going to hurt you the most. And then I crash routers and then destroy firmware code. That's cyber warfare. Cyber warfare, you're trying to make a kinetic attack. Do something that's going to really cause damage. The key thing is you have the cyber criminals who allied, you have the patriotic forces that are allied, and they can go out there and poke around. So 2 weeks after the war started, we started seeing Ukrainian threat actors going into Russia and getting into gas pipeline control stations. Gas pipeline control stations. And the intervention had to happen where, because people, what happened in there is people were going in there says, what if I increase the pressure? What if I decrease the pressure? What if I flip this valve? What happens there is cyberkinetic turns into really kinetic and boom, explosion, right? So that's one of the things that we have to be mindful of is that you don't have a general telling all these volunteers and these cyber criminals, here's what to do. They will go off there and do what they think is best. And they may not be very professional. They may not have a lot of knowledge and they may break into things and not know what's going on. Give an example of that. Years and years ago, I'm working with a colleague. We're on what they now call the dark web. And we saw this one miscreant break into this Cisco GSR router located in this one particular country. And this person's going like, hey, what is this? I don't know what it is. And we're looking at what they're saying. And me and my colleague go like, oh, crap, we got to go call that ISP up and get them off of there because that's connected to an exchange point in Europe, like one of your routers, right? So this is the sort of thing with it. So there's a myth out there that people say, oh, the cyber war isn't happening. Trust me, it is really happening. All the trust groups out there is doing things. Because one of the things that was learned via Stuxnet, when it happened, within 20 minutes, the command and control was shut down, right? So it went out there, security operations, the industry, like everybody here in the room there working together would see an attack and say, this looks suspicious, we need to shut it down. And if you have the power of Border Gateway Protocol, we can remove any IP address off the internet if it seems malicious. We can do that. We have that tool in our community, and we use that tool, and that's what was used in this particular case. Well, the people behind that and everybody else in state actors says, wow, okay, so the industry good guys, all of us in industry, is something we have to make sure we sneak underneath. They can't draw our attention, because if they draw too much attention, we're going to act. We're going to protect our network. We're going to protect our customers. So they keep quiet. So that's one of the reasons you're not seeing this in the press, is because they have to keep their operations really, really quiet, right? So to simplify, you're going to have to tell your boss, cyber warfare, you're either a target, which in Thailand, you're probably not going to be a target in Thailand. Collateral damage, for sure, right? Because collateral damage could be like a destructive worm that gets unleashed. That's happened before. Destructive worms have been sent in from Russia into Ukraine and leaked all over the world. Or you avoided the attack. So The thing is, there are many of these cyber attacks going on, the cyber warfare attacks. So you target, collateral damage, or you ducked. Next, here's another attack. Here's another attack. So that's why there's an emphasis to actually increase your security posture, to really take some time to go through your network and saying, what can I do to make my network more resilient to attack? The good thing about these pieces of devices is anything you do to protect against cyber war, it's going to protect you against cyber crime. It's going to make your network more resilient. So it's not a waste of time. And what's interesting is there's good tools out there. So like one of the tools, like when people are asking me all the time, why aren't we seeing more DDoS for cyber warfare? I go, DDoS and cyber warfare don't mix. Because think of this, a cyber warrior wants to break into an electrical power plant. Like for instance, northern part of India, China has been seen to go in to try to get into the power plant in India. They want to have command and control of that. They want packets to flow. If they do a DOS attack to the power plant, they can't get their packets in, right? So DDoS and cyber war is not really a tool that matches. It's not part of the toolkit. They could use it, but they don't use. A lot of times they don't do it. What they do is they break into the network. They plant their information and control systems inside the network. They figure out what they can do for disruption and destruction, and they sit and wait. And then when it's time, just like what happened with the Viasat, right before the tanks roll across, they launched an operation. They were probably in Viasat for months, sitting there, waiting. Then something in the physical world happens, then you do cyber, right? That's what they call a coordinated operation. That's what their goal is. So you're not going to see a bunch of DOS attacks out there, but you are going to see DOS attacks from the criminals. And you're also going to see more DOS attacks. My prediction is, as the sanctions kick in Russia and you got more people who are unemployed, you got these highly trained technical talent base who need to make money. And because of the sanctions, they can't make money. And what do? They resort over the crime, right? So this is kind of going to be one of the consequences to all of us in our networks, even in Thailand, because you're going to have more cyber criminal actors out there looking to make a buck through ransomware and APT and other factors out there. Then you have this other factor going on. So Friday saw that Conti, which was one of the nefarious, famous ransomware crews, we found out what was really going on. They announced that they're breaking apart. So there's no more Conti. Conti is no more. So anybody says, oh, I'm looking at Conti, Conti does not exist anymore. They just broke apart, rebranded into smaller units, okay? Which is interesting. And then we find out the reason why they attack Costa Rica. They attack the whole country of Costa Rica, one system, next system, big crisis, a whole bunch of people working on it, hours working on it. We're all wondering if it's a demonstration attack. We were all wrong. Everybody was wrong until we found out on Friday that Conti, that they attacked a country, to take out a country, to get people distracted while they redid all their criminal infrastructure. So they redid their criminal infrastructure, and all everybody was looking at trying to figure out how to help out Costa Rica so they can redo their criminal operation and break it apart into smaller units. Okay, so understand that. Top security professionals in the world, and we were all wrong about what the cyber criminal people were doing, and they, just to keep people distracted, would take out a country. Their cyber attack stuff. Okay, so this is understand the difference in cyber warfare. You don't get that in cyber criminal activities. This is a cyber warfare. They're breaking apart so they can actually be more nimble because they're declared for Russia. They're doing a lot of these activities as a Russian affiliated ransomware crew. So this is one of the reasons why people are really raising that bar. So much so back in March, this goes back a couple of months, March 21st, President Biden did the first presidential security advisory. We don't have presidential security advisories, but he put out a security advisory. And this is what we're going to kind of walk through and talk through how this can help out with it, right? And what's interesting is the CERT teams. And as I point out, Thai CERT is one of the well-respected computer emergency response teams in the industry, right? They produce unique materials that everybody relies upon, all right? They know all these people at the different CERT teams putting out in the United States, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, what they call the Five Eyes. I'll talk about that. And they're putting out subtle intelligence that help you figure out, okay, if I only have 8 hours in the day of doing the work, and I can only do so many things, what cybersecurity activity should I focus on? Because there's so many things I need to do. What focus should I put on there? And this is the tools they're helping out with. Because what they're doing is they're looking at the attacks. They can't tell you the classified stuff. But what they can do is they can say, if you had did this, you would not have been attacked by these threat actors. So they're being very good at telling you the indicators, and given the consequences, given what I call the corrective actions. If you had done these, you're more resistant, right? So you're getting these 5-eye advisories, these joint advisories. Whenever I see a joint advisory, I kind of wake up. I really wake up. Like the one I'm going through is the one that came out, late Wednesday last week, right? There's a cybersecurity advisory I'm using right now. I'm digesting because they said core things of what to do, right? It's very, very useful. Now I'm using it for me inside Akamai, right? Because that's where I work. We're paying attention to this and using it, right? As a tool, right? So because the interest here is how to protect critical infrastructure, right? You got critical infrastructure, you can look at these slides with it. And what they're trying to do is minimize the impact of the cyberkinetic operations. They're trying to say, part of cyber warfare is you see the enemy do certain things. It's starting to break into electrical plants. Here's the techniques they're using. Then if you go and teach everybody in electrical plants, if you do these 3 things, you have just blunted the attack coming from the enemy. So this is part of cyber warfare. Defense is part of your warfare mechanics. It's not just attack. You can defend yourself, and by defending yourself, you're being a good threat, being good defensive stuff. So when you pull down the slides, these are groups that I'm, one of my big takeaways from this talk is people here, everybody here, subscribe to the emails or subscribe to the Twitters of all these organizations, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. ENISA is a little bit more long-term. They're not part of the Five Eyes, but it's really worth signing up to it. UK and US, right? And you sign up to them. It doesn't cost you anything. It's an email subscription. We all have email subscriptions. But you put an alarm on it. When the alerts come out, you go like, let me go read this. Because they'll tell you, here's 3 things. If you do these 3 things, and then you read through the report, and I'll point this out in the talk here. And you pull all of them down. Because what happens is the different groups do different things, right? The United States alerts are very like, throw everything at it. Do 40 things. They're overwhelming. A lot of people will look and go, oh, wow, this is too much. The UK would do things more tuned. Australia was simplify. I always tell people, go to Australia first, because they'll take the 40 things that the US is saying, and they'll condense it down to do these 3 things. So I tell people, says, when you see these joint alerts, go to Australia, read their report, do theirs first. Because it's simple and succinct, it's most important stuff. So that's why you look at multiple of these reports, because they give you guidance with it, right? So, and you ignore it at your peril. Apricot, which is a resource, everybody here should go look at the Apricot videos, because Apricot 2022, very good conference with it, associated with it. But one of the things that as I was preparing for Apricot 2022 is that if you have a Cisco router in your network, okay, and you're using certain types of security on your router, what the National Security Agency has said is the Russians probably have the passwords to your router, and they're probably in your network. That was an advisory that came out in 2018. They restated it in February to remind people, your device is probably compromised, right? I missed it because I wasn't watching until the crisis started going over here, and I missed it. I went, oh, wow, this is serious. So I started doing some spot checks around, and yeah, okay, that could be an issue for us. So if you want to see a detailed talk of that, you can go to this talk on Apricot, and this is part of the workshop that we did for router security, all right? So these Five Eye teams, you've got this rhythm of action, and the rhythm of action is such that, they're putting the advisories out more and more and more. We're going to talk about the one from March, but there's more of them coming out all the time. And so you sign up to them, you look at them, you read through and say, what do I need to do on my network? Can I do certain things? Like one of the things coming out in the last reports is if you have multi-factor authentication turned on your network, what they're pointing out is the threat actors know how to get around the misconfiguration of MFA. So you can say, I got multi-factor authentication turned on, but have you audited and is it configured properly? Because the bad guys are getting around it. They're getting around it over and over again. That comes out in every single one of the advisories is that they're saying multi-factor authentication, you should have it, but it's not configured properly and people are getting around it. So when you see things like that, you go like, let me call up my multi-factor authentication vendor. Let's bring him in. Let's do an audit. Let's make sure everything is configured properly in my network. Makes sense. Helps you in cyberware, helps you in cybercrime, helps your network. Make sure nothing, is mistaken. You never know what can happen with it, right? So we're just going to go through touch base now because of time. There'll be a longer video that I do on this, and I'll push it up on my YouTube channel so people can see it on a longer version, and you can kind of sit there and see how to load through it. Key thing with this is when these advisories are coming out, don't ignore them. Don't dismiss and ignore them. A lot of people go like, okay, yeah, configure MFA. I do MFA. But what they're saying here is not configure MFA. They're saying configure it properly because the bad guys are getting around it. What they're saying in these advisory reports is they've gone in, somebody got broken into, and they're actually doing analysis with it, right? So you got a threat actor. A threat actor gets into some place like a plant or something like that, right? That plant says, oh man, I'm being attacked. I got a threat actor inside my network, right? I got some indicators. I need help. So they go out there and call for help, right? And they call for help for these organizations because you can do that. You can call up your national CSIRT organization and says, I need help. These CSIRT organizations then compare notes. So you're getting a big surface area. You get United States, Canada, Netherlands, because Netherlands is part of the last one. They're not part of Five Eyes, but the last one had Netherlands and Canada, Australia, New Zealand, right? And they go out there and do, here's the investigation. And we found this, we found this, found this. Okay, that's usually classified. But then they say, here's the conclusion. If they had done these things, then they would have been able to defeat the bad guy. Okay. Then they put out a new advisory. So like 2 weeks ago, they put out an advisory that everybody here should check because everybody here, you have cloud services, you have edge services, right? You should be, because managed service providers are being used to get into networks. That was the advisory with it. And it had all these findings that all of you in the room there should say, after this conference, I should go talk to my vendors. I should be talking to my cloud operators. What are they doing? That was the advisory go out there. So you go read that one. So this is the cycle. This is a cycle going on. How much does this cost you? You don't have to subscribe to anything. That's the beauty of this, is you get up-to-date top threat intelligence that's actionable, to tell you what to do to help reduce the risk of cyberwar. And it costs you the time to configure the emails, the time to print out the reports, read what you need to do, talk it over and get the action done. You don't have, there's no capital expense. It's all just taking the time to make it happen. All right. So when you get into this, and this is, I'm keeping mindful of time. I don't know if they're going to ping me on the time period with it. But as you go through the fact sheet, because in March, they had this fact sheet that went with it. And the fact sheet, when I saw this fact sheet, I went like, wow. And then with the fact sheet, again, I went over to Australia. So as you go through here, you see this is Australia's advisory. Do these 4 things. Then I'm going to go through the fact sheet, which came out from America, and you can kind of see the difference here, right? Same intelligence, right? They all work together, same intelligence. President Biden decided to do a presidential security advisory, but there was the same intel. They looked at the same data. Australia says, do these 4 things, right? That's the interesting thing with it. So Australia goes through patch. This is all makes sense. This is all logical, but it means that people are not patching, that people are not protected against phishing and spear phishing, right? They're not got the logs set up properly. This is something that's coming up all the time is we're seeing that people are not having an organization to log set up and secure. So they can't investigate. If you don't have the data to investigate, it's hard, right? And then check your business continuity plans and your incident response plans. A lot of times the plans don't work. So that was Australia's recommendation with it. The UK knew these attacks are happening and they did preparation materials. So they pointed to preparation materials. They have a really good guide, and I point people to go next, which is actions to take when cyber threat is heightened. If you're worried about cyber threat, UK NCSC has this brilliant guide, and you download it, and it's like a checklist. And a checklist you can go through with your executives in your organization. Here's what we need to do, right? You don't need to hire any consultant. You just go through that checklist. Everything on there, people who are, if you're running a network, you'll know, oh, I know how to do these things. Let's make it happen. So then you get to the fact sheet that came out, right? So you can see this wealth of information that comes across. So yes, we have to worry about cyber warfare, but we're not sitting here not knowing what to do. We're actually, it's being laid in front of us. Here's what we can do. This is nice for us. So multi-factor authentication, make sure it's configured properly, right? So they pointed this out. This is how the bad guys have been getting in. They're finding out that people say, oh, I got antivirus. Antivirus isn't enough. You need to use endpoint detection and response. And a lot of people go, what is that? Well, Red Canary's got a good write-up for it. Go read Red Canary, because endpoint detection and response is more than just the antivirus on the endpoint. And this is really important when we're working from home all the time. So we're remote working with it. Aggressively patch, what the Australians put out. The miscreants, both the criminals and the state actors, are getting in with unpatched systems, right? So that's one of the things we have to watch out for. Just assume they have your passwords. This is my advice to people over and over again. Because think of this, we just read in the news, data breach, data breach, data breach. Where's all these data breaches going? Think of the state actors buying all the data breaches, pulling them all together into this big data lake of all the data breaches. Now they can search. Now they can go out there and say, let's search for Barry Greene. They can see all my passwords from Barry Greene. They can see all connections with it, who I'm connected to, who's in my family, where's my house at. They'll get all the information if you put it together in a big data lake. Just think that the bad guys have that. And that's what we're fighting against. Now, industry has not been sitting on our hands. Google, Firefox, Safari all have tools to help you say, hey, I think your passwords need to be updated, right? And they'll give you warnings here. You got compromised passwords, you got weak passwords, do you have safe browsing extensions protected, things like that. One of the exercises I do with my team, and this is an example for everybody here, while you're sitting there, if you're bored, go to haveibeenpwned.com. And you go to haveibeenpwned.com. So right now, if you're bored with what I'm saying, go to haveibeenpwned. Start putting in your passwords and your emails and see what comes up. You'll be surprised. Oh, I've been using that password for the past year. Oh, it's compromised. I've been using this email. Oh, how many times has that been compromised? It's a beautiful service to the community. And I use it with my teams doing little exercises to say, let's go through and do a Have I Been Pwned exercise. And people get surprised, how vulnerable they are. And just not just your work, do your home and do your kids, right? Do your spouse, right? Do all of it. Backups. Backups are not working like they thought they were supposed to be working. Matter of fact, many of the organizations that I've gone in and done the root cause corrective action, they've been broken into. And one of the questions I'll ask them is, do you have a security plan for your backup system? They go, no, it's the firewall. So, okay, they've broken through the firewall, they're in your network, they're moving across your network, and they're going after the backup systems. And you have no security inside your network for it. It's like they have a shell, and once they get through the shell, they go after the backups. Okay, dangerous, right? So this is one of the things that they're pointing out consistently. All the different reports point towards the backups, right? A good tool, because you got to explain this to your boss. You got to explain, we should pay attention to this. If you go to CertNZ, so notice we've got a lot of good resources in Asia. You go to CertNZ in New Zealand, they put together this life cycle of a ransomware incident. It gives a really good simplified illustration of the things you need to protect yourself. Has a good write-up with it. I've been using it all the time to give talks and presentations to explain to people. And you notice backups. The story of backups is on here. Okay, so you can use this tool. I take and hack into it, and I put little diagrams around it and say, here's what this threat actor is doing and that. So useful tool. So this is a hint for you to help you convince your peers and your boss. Then your playbook. Playbook is like, oh, I'm under attack. What's my playbook? What do I do? Step A, step B, step C. What do I do? What we find is you prepare the playbook, but then you don't review it until a year later, or you don't review it until something happens. You need to review it more than, once or twice a year. Like every quarter, review your playbook. So we find this as a consistent problem. And this is what the Five Eyes are saying back in March. And they've been saying it over and over again in subsequent reports that people are not updating their playbooks. So when something happens, the network has changed and what's in the playbook doesn't work. Things change in your network all the time. We all know that. We're all touching our networks. We're doing things in our networks. Life is not static. The network moves. And you have to update your processes and procedures for a crisis, right? The other thing is they point out, which gets a little bit more complicated, is expect your data to get stolen. So encrypt it. Figure out if you have an encryption in there. Now, this gets a little bit heavy because a lot of organizations say, well, that's costly. I don't know if I can do that. But this is something to have in your consideration, right? That they pointed out. And then turn all your employees into a security front line. In one organization I worked at in the past, I turned everybody in the organization where they can report security vulnerabilities and security issues. Everybody. And people said, well, that's a lot of people. Says, well, I'll train the entire workforce. I went from like 2 or 3 people finding security issues to like 7,000 people doing security issues, right? And just set up the system. You get people encouraged to report. You train them, you get them to report it, right? Because what happens is in state actors, they hide. Remember what I mentioned before, they like to hide. So you take the Google Aurora operation. Google Aurora was a state actor from China that broke into organizations all over North America. And we detected it through a fluke, because we call it, you trip over a thread. Oh, this is not what I expect. Let me go follow the thread. Oh, holy cow, this is a advanced persistent threat inside my organization. I didn't know that. That only works if somebody encourages a report, because somebody saw something weird, they reported it. It was the thread. Google followed the thread, and they found a huge operation going on. So not only teach your people how to be really good security practitioners, but encourage them to report, because reporting could save your butt. Work with your national CSIRT teams, right? So in the report to say, oh, because it's more U.S. bias, right? So to work with, the Federal Bureau of Investigation and groups like that. In Thailand, there will be CyberWar, right? Again, they're one of the most respected of the national CERT teams out there because of the materials and tools they do. I don't know if people there in Thailand would be surprised when I say that, but that's their view in there. And they're part of this community first.org, which is the first incident response security teams around the world. It's all the security teams, and CyberWar's right in the middle of that community. And that community of all their peers around the world respects CyberWar. So this is something that, if you don't have a relationship with them, you're not connected to them, you're not using some of their services, you're not getting their daily reports. They got these really daily reports that not everybody can get, but if you run a network, you can get these. They're very, very useful to people. So that's why I'm going to kind of close with, because I wanted to have time for Q&A, time for questions before I get any further with it. So what I'm going to do now is just drop off the slide share for a moment and open us up to some Q&A. So, and you can ask your questions in the session here. Let me pop up my Q&A, see if there's any questions. You can ask it on the mic too. Maybe I can hear it on the mic.
Yes. If you have questions, you can walk out to the front. We have microphone here. Any questions? Okay, seems like no one has question. Okay,
That's
thank
okay.
you very much.